A glint of glass over Kent. August 16th, 1940. 23,000 feet above Kent, England. The sky is painfully clear, the kind of blue that makes metal shine. Sunlight spills across the wings of a Supermarine Spitfire Mki as it claws eastward, engine screaming at full military power. The propeller bites the air in a constant blur. Inside the cockpit, Flight Lieutenant Alan Deere presses his oxygen mask tighter against his face, eyes scanning forward through the reflector sight. The channel lies behind him. France is somewhere ahead, and somewhere above, below, or directly behind him, German fighters are hunting. The radio crackles with half-heard calls from No. 54 Squadron. Voices overlap, clipped and urgent. Contact reports, altitudes, bearings, warnings that come seconds too late. Deere feels it before he sees it, that instinctive tightening in the gut, the sensation of being watched. His shoulders tense, fingers squeeze the control column, and his eyes flick upward. Then he sees it, a small rectangle of reflected sky, a sliver of silver movement that does not belong to the clouds. A Messerschmitt Bf 109, high and fast, sliding down out of the sun directly onto his tail. Deere reacts instantly. He slams the Spitfire into a hard brake, rolling left and pulling back, the airframe shuddering under the load. Tracer flashes past his canopy, bright white streaks tearing through the space he occupied a heartbeat earlier. The German overshoots, roaring past in a blur of gray and black crosses. Deere exhales. He is alive because he saw it coming. And he saw it because of a piece of equipment the Air Ministry nearly refused to allow on his aircraft. Bolted to the top of the Spitfire cockpit canopy is a small, simple mirror. It weighs almost nothing. It adds no speed. It produces no firepower. It does not make the aircraft climb faster or turn tighter. And yet, at this moment, it has done what armor plating, extra guns, and more horsepower could not. It warned him of death from behind. Only months earlier, that mirror was dismissed as pointless. In the design offices and engineering departments of the Royal Aircraft Establishment, discussions about if a component did not directly improve performance, it was a liability. A mirror was considered deadweight. Engineers argued that pilots should rely on discipline and formation tactics. They believed constant head movement and situational awareness were sufficient. A trained pilot, they insisted, did not need a mirror. Adding one would create glare, distraction, or worse, a false sense of security. Some even mocked the idea. A shaving mirror for fighter pilots. A toy for nervous flyers. But the men actually flying into combat knew something the drafting tables did not. Air combat over Britain was not a neat exchange of turning duels. It was chaos at extreme speed. Attacks came from above, out of the sun, from blind angles no amount of neck craning could reliably cover. German pilots had learned to strike unseen, diving at nearly 400 miles per hour, firing in a single pass, then climbing away. Many British pilots never knew what hit them. By midsummer, casualty reports told a grim story. Spitfires and Hurricanes were being shot down with pilots reporting no warning, no sight of the enemy until cannon shells were already tearing through wings and fuselage. Survivors spoke of a constant fear, a pressure between the shoulder blades, the knowledge that death came from behind. Some pilots began improvising. Ground crews noticed it first. Small mirrors scavenged from civilian sources. Polished bits of metal. Anything that could reflect the sky behind. These were bolted, glued, or wired to canopy frames. It was unofficial, unauthorized, technically forbidden, but worked. Pilots began reporting earlier sightings of attacking fighters. More break turns in time. Fewer surprise kills by the enemy. The mirror did not win dogfights, but it prevented ambushes. It bought seconds. In air combat, seconds were everything. Still, higher command hesitated. There was no official trial. No engineering study proving effectiveness. Only pilot testimony, which some desk officers regarded as anecdotal and unreliable. They worried about standardization, supply, and precedent. If pilots could demand mirrors, what would they demand next? Extra armor, extra fuel, extra guns. all weight, all cost. So the mirrors remained unofficial. That is, until pilots began refusing to fly without them. By August, squadrons quietly made it clear. Aircraft without mirrors were left on the dispersal fields. Pilots would swap airframes before missions. Ground crews learned to install mirrors as a matter of routine, often before inspections. No one issued a written order. None was needed. Up in the thin air over Kent, Alan Deere levels out after his brake turn, heart hammering, eyes already flicking back to the mirror. The reflected sky is empty now. The Messerschmitt has passed. He is still in the fight. Below him, smoke rises from fields and villages. The battle continues, minute by minute, aircraft by aircraft. And a tiny square of glass has just changed how this war in the air is fought. The blind spot that killed without warning. The Spitfire surges forward again, Merlin engine settling into a steady roar as Alan Deere reforms with the scattered elements of his squadron. The fight is not over. It never is. Every pilot knows that the most dangerous moment is not the attack itself, but the seconds afterward, when attention narrows and instinct relaxes. Deere does not relax. His eyes keep snapping upward again and again to the mirror bolted above his head. It reflects a narrow cone of sky behind him. Not much, just enough. That narrow cone represents the most lethal blind spot in air combat. In theory, fighter pilots are trained to keep their heads on a swivel. Check 6. Skin high, skin low. Look into the sun. In practice, doing that while flying at combat speeds is brutally difficult. At 300 miles per hour, with oxygen mask tight against your face, canopy frames cutting vision into segments, and the constant vibration of the airframe, turning your head fully around is slow and disorienting. And you cannot look everywhere at once. German fighter doctrine exploits this perfectly. Luftwaffe pilots are taught to attack from above and behind, diving out of the sun where the glare blinds the target. They fire at close range, often less than 200 yards, then disengage immediately. There is no prolonged turning fight, no warning shot, just a brief burst of cannon and machine gun fire, then gone. British pilots call it the unseen killer. Squadron record from June and July tell the same story over and over. Aircraft damaged or destroyed by enemy fire from behind. Pilots reporting no visual contact before impact. Some never even make a radio call. Those who survive describe the same sensation. A sudden hammering, a flash of metal tearing past the canopy, oil on the windscreen, the engine coughing, then dying. By the time a pilot realizes he is under attack, it is already too late. The mirror changes that equation. Not by much. It does not show the entire rear hemisphere. It does not identify friend or foe. It does not replace awareness. But it does something vital. It gives movement. Human vision is exquisitely sensitive to motion. A flicker, a shape crossing the reflected sky, a sudden change in brightness. The mirror turns the dead zone behind the aircraft into a place where motion can be detected instantly. Pilots describe it as a sixth sense. Flight Sergeant Eric Locke, one of Fighter Command's rising aces, tells his ground crew that the mirror saved his life twice in 1 week. Both times he saw nothing more than a flash, a speck growing too fast to ignore. Both times he broke hard, just as tracers passed through where his cockpit had been. Without the mirror, he would never have seen them. Engineers back at Farnborough are not convinced. From their perspective, the mirror introduces problems. It creates drag, however small. It might vibrate loose. It could shatter under stress. It might distract the pilot during critical moments. And there is no control data proving it improves survival rates. They ask for studies, trials, standardized mounting instructions. The pilots do not wait. As sorties increase, mirrors proliferate. Hurricanes receive them. Spitfires receive them. Different shapes, different sizes. Some circular, some rectangular, some mounted centrally, others offset. Whatever fits. Ground crews learn which pilots insist on them. Aircraft without mirrors are quietly retrofitted overnight. Official maintenance logs rarely mention them. The war does not pause for paperwork. Combat tactics begin to shift almost immediately. Pilots with mirrors are harder to surprise. German attackers are forced to break off earlier or commit to riskier angles. More engagements turn into turning fights instead of one-pass kills. British pilots survive longer, learn faster, gain experience. Experience is the currency of air war. Losses do not stop. Aircraft still burn. Pilots still fall. But the nature of combat changes. The Luftwaffe's advantage of surprise begins to erode, not because of a new engine or weapon, but because British pilots can now see death coming. Some squadron leaders begin to brief mirror usage explicitly. Check it every few seconds. Do not stare. Use it to cue head movement. If you see motion, brake immediately. It becomes instinct. Up over Kent, deer catches another flicker. Not a full silhouette, just a shadow crossing the reflected sky. He reacts without thinking. The Spitfire snaps into a dive, engine howling. Cannon shells rip through the space he occupied moments earlier. Another ambush defeated not by firepower, but by awareness. On the ground, engineers still argue. In the air, pilots have already made their decision. From improvisation to unofficial doctrine. September 7th, 1940. Biggin Hill, south of London. The airfield is scarred and smoking. Bomb craters still warm from the morning raid. Dispersal huts are shredded. Hangars burn at the edges. And yet, on the grass, Spitfires are being refueled and rearmed as if nothing has happened. The battle does not pause for damage. Squadron leader Douglas Bader strides across the field, one leg stiff, the metal prosthesis hidden beneath his flight suit. He stops beside a Spitfire and looks up at the canopy. There it is, the mirror. Bader taps it with a gloved finger. It wobbles slightly, then steadies. Good. Bader is not an engineer. He does not care about drag coefficients or theoretical distraction. He cares about killing the enemy and keeping his pilots alive. And he has seen what happens to men who cannot see behind them. He makes his view clear in the briefing room. Any aircraft without a mirror is grounded. No discussion. The statement carries weight. Bader's reputation as a fighter leader is already formidable. When he speaks, pilots listen. Ground crews move quickly to comply. Mirrors appear on every canopy frame by the end of the day. Elsewhere, similar decisions are being made. Wing leaders, squadron commanders, and flight commanders quietly incorporate mirrors into their operational expectations. There is still no official Air Ministry directive, but in practice, the mirror has become standard equipment. It begins to shape behavior. Pilots trust it, but they also learn its limitations. The mirror does not replace formation discipline. It does not eliminate surprise entirely. It simply reduces it. Used incorrectly, it can be dangerous. Staring at it too long leads to fixation. Looking without reacting wastes its value. Training evolves on the fly. Veteran pilots teach newcomers how to use the mirror instinctively. A glance every few seconds. A scan pattern that includes the reflected sky. Immediate reaction to movement, not confirmation. Break first. Identify later. Those who fail to learn quickly do not last. The Luftwaffe notices the change. German pilots report fewer easy kills. Surprise attacks result in evasive maneuvers more often. British fighters are braking earlier, harder, with more confidence. The window for a clean, firing solution narrows. Some German units adapt by attacking in pairs or from steeper angles. Others increase speed and distance, firing from farther away. Effectiveness drops. Ammunition is wasted. Opportunities vanish. A feedback loop begins. British pilots survive longer. Survivors gain experience. Experienced pilots become more lethal. German losses increase, especially among less seasoned flyers sent to replace casualties. None of this appears in official memos attributing success to mirrors. There are too many variables, too many moving parts in a massive air campaign. But among pilots, the conclusion is obvious. They will not fly without it. Even aircraft manufacturers take notice. Factory workers begin drilling small mounting points into canopy frames before delivery. Some do it quietly, without instruction. Others do it at the request of squadron representatives visiting to accept new aircraft. The mirror is becoming institutionalized without permission. Back at Farnborough, engineers finally begin to gather data. Not control trials, but reports. Pilot debriefs. Combat narratives. They notice a pattern. Aircraft equipped with mirrors are more likely to report sighting enemy attackers before being engaged. Pilots are surviving initial attacks more often. The data is messy, incomplete, but it is enough to shift opinion. One engineer notes privately that the mirror does not make the aircraft better. It makes the pilot better. That distinction matters. Late in the battle, as daylight raids intensify and fatigue sets in, the mirror proves especially valuable. Tired pilots miss things. Their necks ache. Their reaction times slow. The mirror compensates just enough to keep them alive. By October, it is unthinkable to send a fighter into combat without one. Up in the air, a young pilot fresh from training catches his first glimpse of an enemy in the mirror. Panic flashes. Training takes over. He breaks, dives, survives. Later, on the ground, he runs a hand over the mirror and says nothing. He does not need to. The modification that engineers once dismissed has quietly rewritten how fighters fight. The engineers confront reality in the data. October 12, 1940. Royal Aircraft Establishment, Farnborough. Rain streaks down the tall windows as stacks of combat reports lie spread across a long wooden table. The war feels distant here, muted by brick walls and paperwork, but the evidence of it sits in black ink and grease smudges. Each report tells a fragment of the same story. Enemy sighted from rear quarter. Evasive action taken. Aircraft survived. Wing Commander Frank Whittle is not present, nor are famous aces or squadron leaders. This room belongs to engineers, analysts, and officers whose job is to decide what matters and what is not. For months, they resisted the mirror, not out of stubbornness, but out of habit. In aviation design, every addition is a compromise. Weight costs performance. Protrusions create drag. Complexity invites failure. These principles have been drilled into them since before the war. And yet the numbers refuse to go away. Aircraft returning with damage patterns show fewer catastrophic rear fuselage hits. Pilot debriefs increasingly mention early visual cues. Survival rates after initial contact are creeping upward. Not dramatically, not uniformly, but enough to matter. One analyst traces a finger along a graph and frowns. There is no engine upgrade here. No change in armament. No new fuel. And yet something has shifted. The mirror is no longer a rumor. It is a variable. They argue again, but the tone is different now. Concerns about glare are revisited and largely dismissed. Pilots report minimal distraction when properly angled. Fears of structural failure prove unfounded. Mirrors vibrate, but they stay put. Drag is measured and found to be negligible, lost in the noise of canopy framing and radio masts. The engineers begin to ask a different question. Why do we dismiss this so quickly? The answer is uncomfortable, because it did not fit their model of improvement. It was not elegant. It was not technical. It was human. The mirror does not enhance the machine. It enhances perception. It acknowledges a simple truth of combat aviation. The pilot is not an ideal observer. He is limited by physiology, stress, and fatigue. Any device that compensates for that is not a luxury. It is a necessity. By late October, the Air Ministry quietly approves standardized rear-view mirrors for fighter command aircraft. There is no press release, no announcement, just a technical note circulated through maintenance units specifying size, placement, and angle. The war moves too fast for celebration. Manufacturers adjust. New Spitfires and Hurricanes arrive with factory-mounted mirrors. Ground crews replace improvised versions with standardized ones when time allows. In combat units, no one cares which version is fitted, only that it is there. Pilots barely notice the transition. For them, the mirror has already been part of the cockpit for months. Its presence is as natural as the gun sight or throttle. They glance at it without thinking. They react to movement without hesitation. German pilots continue to adapt, but the balance has changed. Surprise is harder to achieve. Attacks require more coordination. Risk increases. The Battle of Britain grinds on, then slowly ebbs. The Luftwaffe shifts strategy. Daylight raids give way to night bombing. Fighter engagements decrease. Losses mount on both sides. When the fighting eases, analysts review the campaign. They will argue for decades about what won the battle. Radar, command and control, aircraft performance, pilot training, all of it matters. But buried in technical appendices and maintenance notes is a quiet lesson. A modification once labeled useless did not win the battle by itself, but it kept pilots alive long enough to fight another day. And in a war of attrition, that mattered more than any single technological leap. The mirror stays. It will appear on fighters throughout the rest of the war. Larger, clearer, better integrated. Other air forces adopt similar solutions. The idea spreads. Pilots will come to expect it, and engineers will remember it. How a small change reshaped air combat everywhere. March 3rd, 1942. 28,000 feet over the English Channel. A new generation of fighters slices through thin, freezing air. The war has expanded. The stakes are higher. Aircraft are faster, heavier, and more lethal. But above the canopy of a Spitfire MKV, the same small mirror still reflects the sky behind. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson, now a seasoned combat pilot, glances upward as naturally as he breathes. The motion is automatic, a habit formed years earlier during the desperate days of 1940. The mirror flashes. A distant speck. High. Closing. He reacts instantly, rolling into a shallow dive before the attacker can commit. The German pilot breaks off, robbed of surprise. This pattern is repeated across skies from the Channel to North Africa. What began as an improvised fix during Britain's darkest hour has become embedded in air combat culture. Pilots no longer think of rear-view awareness as optional. It is assumed. Any aircraft that lacks it feels naked. Other air forces take notice. American observers visiting Britain in 1941 report the mirror's value with blunt clarity. Yuzov fighters arriving in Europe soon carry their own versions. On P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs, mirrors appear above the canopy or integrated into frames. Some pilots prefer larger versions. Others favor two mirrors angled outward to widen coverage. The philosophy is the same. Survive the first attack. Tactics evolve accordingly. High-speed slashing attacks become riskier. Dogfights last longer. Energy management becomes more complex. The simple advantage of unseen approach erodes across all fronts. The mirror influences training as well. Instructors now teach scanning patterns that incorporate it deliberately. Check mirror. Check high 6. Check sun. Repeat. New pilots are drilled to react to motion, not confirmation. Hesitation is death. This changes psychology. Pilots feel less hunted. Still afraid but not blind. That matters. Confidence affects aggression. Aggression affects outcomes. Aircraft designers quietly adapt their thinking. Future cockpits begin to account for human limitations more seriously. Canopy framing is reduced. Bubble canopies are explored. Visibility becomes a design priority, not an afterthought. The mirror is not the sole cause, but it is a catalyst. A reminder that awareness is as important as performance. Even jet aircraft will carry mirrors into the early Cold War. Some pilots insist on them long after radar and warning systems appear. Habit and trust are powerful things. The mirror never becomes glamorous. It is never highlighted in recruitment posters or victory claims. It does not fire bullets or drop bombs. But pilots know its value. They touch it before climbing in. Adjust it carefully. Trust it implicitly. Back in 1940, engineers called it unnecessary. By 1942, no one argues. The war continues to escalate. New threats emerge. New technologies arrive. But the lesson remains. Small changes that respect the human inside the machine can alter the course of combat, just as surely as horsepower or firepower. The lesson pilots never forgot. May 7th, 1945. RAF Coltishall, Norfolk. The war in Europe is ending. Aircraft line the field in neat rows, their paint scarred by years of service. Some will never fly again. Others will be ferried to storage or scrapped where they sit. Pilots gather in small groups, talking quietly, not celebrating yet. Too many empty chairs remain in the mess. A veteran pilot climbs into the cockpit of his Spitfire one last time. He runs his gloved hand over familiar controls. Throttle, gun sight, canopy latch. Then his fingers brush the mirror. It is scratched now, pitted by grit and time, but still intact, still reflecting the sky behind. He remembers the first time it saved him, the flash of movement, the instinctive break, the sudden realization that survival sometimes depended on seeing what could not be seen before. No official citation ever mentions the mirror. No victory tally includes it. And yet nearly every pilot who survived the war carries the same private certainty. They would not be here without it. Engineers will write post-war reports analyzing aircraft performance, weapon effectiveness, and production efficiency. They will chart kill ratios and sortie counts. In those documents, the mirror will appear as a footnote at best. But among pilots, its legacy is far larger. It represents a moment when lived experience overruled theory, when men flying into combat refused to accept blind spots as inevitable, when a simple modification changed behavior, tactics, and outcomes across an entire air war. The lesson endures beyond World War II. Modern cockpits bristle with sensors, displays, and warning systems, all designed to extend human perception beyond natural limits. They're more advanced, more complex, more precise. But the principle is the same as that small square of glass over Kent. You cannot fight what you cannot see. As the veteran climbs down from the aircraft, he pauses and looks back at it one last time. The mirror catches the late afternoon light and reflects the empty sky. A quiet reminder of how something once dismissed as useless became indispensable.